Ladies and gents, this is the moment you've waited for. I just watched The Greatest Showman. I watched it as a part of a double feature with Freaks, the 1932 horror film, I guess. So I'm going to record a review for that right afterwards. Watch that too if you want. Please do. Basically, the plot is not P.T. Barnum is the son of a tailor, and he's in love with a girl who's from a really rich family. Until one day his father dies and he's left homeless. When he's homeless on the street, starving and in a back alley, a freak gives him an apple and he thinks, I can exploit that. And then he does. So, I'll go through the songs. I'll rate them all. I'm going to try and do it non-spoiler, but I'll talk about how good they are. So, The Greatest Show is, I think, a great intro to the film. It grips you right away. I think it's a really good idea, starting with, we get to see him as a showman and that, and then before it goes back in time, we see him as a kid. So, Great Show, banger. Million Dreams. My problem with musicals sometimes is the songs are kind of there to sell as songs individually, so they don't really have much to do with the plot. They kind of just, someone sings about being sad. Whereas A Million Dreams is a great song in itself, but it's also, it kind of tells the story, at least with the visuals, not necessarily the song, but they get a lot of plot out during this song. Pretty much all of P.T. Barnum's growing up. Come Alive's pretty good too. The Other Side, straight up banger. I did that once with my mate, and we did a shot of whiskey every time they do in that. I think it's like 7 each, or like I think maybe Zac Efron does 1 or 2 more. But yeah, it's impossible because they don't take any breath. They just put a shot in their mouth and then they don't swallow. They just carry on singing immediately after. So that's a bit silly. But otherwise, what a banger of a song that is. That scene annoys me though, because it so clearly should have been one shot. They keep doing long takes and it looks impressive, but then it would just cut, and it's like, if you're already doing quite a few long takes, just do the whole thing as one long take and then it'd be a lot more impressive. But sadly they don't do that. They kind of half-ass it a bit. Never Enough, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's maybe not a go-to for me for like listening back to the soundtrack, but it's fine. But next is This Is Me, straight up banger. We're all agreed that's a great song. Then Rewrite the Stars. I think this is probably the weakest of the whole thing, but it's still, it's fine. Tightrope is very forgettable. In fact, when I got to it in the film, I forgot it even existed until we got to the chorus. I was like, oh yeah. It's all right. And then we get a reprise of Never Enough. From Now On. Oh my god, From Now On is the best song. That is such a fun song. I mean, it kind of doesn't make sense within the narrative of the film. Like, bad stuff's happening to P.T. Barnum without going into it too much, and then he kind of just sings a song, and then all his problems go away. But it's so good. And then we get the finale, which is brilliant. So the songs are all great, and I think as a musical, I mean, the film's only about an hour and a half long. It's not that long, and it's really dense. Like, it's never. Maybe some of the middle, it doesn't slow down really. It doesn't get slow. It just goes to like a standard film pace. Whereas the rest of it is just, it's just so fast paced. It's just banger after banger, great scene after great scene. Yeah. So as just a film entertainment thing, I think to watch with mates as well. Watch as like a sing along thing with mates. It's really good. It's just such a fun time. But now I'll go into why I watched it as a double feature with Freaks. So it's a great film, but morally, I'm a little bit unconvinced. Well, first of all, I'll talk about P.T. Barnum, and I think the biggest mistake of the film is, okay, so this film is quite fictional. It's a biopic about P.T. Barnum in the loosest possible sense, in that he's a completely different character, but P.T. Barnum was a famous sort of circus ringmaster, and so's Hugh Jackman's character in this film. Otherwise, they're completely different. So I think the biggest problem with this film, by the way, P.T. Barnum, horrible guy. I'll just say some things off the top of my head of what he did that was bad. Okay, which they completely skipped out in this. So he became famous. His very first sideshow act was he got an old black woman she wasn't a slave because Connecticut, I think, was the state, or Pennsylvania. It was one of them. I think it was Pennsylvania. They had outlawed slavery, but it was because of some legal loophole. It meant that she was effectively a slave. And he claimed that she was the 161-year-old nurse, or like wet nurse, or whatever, of George Washington. And so that was a scam. We know the whole thing. I mean, they make clear in this film that he's, everything's fake. Like, we know that. So yeah, he basically exploited who was effectively a slave. and then since then apparently he beat slaves too. He later regretted it, and he later was anti-slavery, and he fought for like the rights of black people, but that was late in his life. In fact, he didn't become sort of the greatest showman, as it were, until he was in his 60s, and Hugh Jackman is not in his 60s. He definitely doesn't look like P.T. Barnum as well. But no, P.T. Barnum did loads of horrible stuff. He stacked elephants on top of each other and said that they couldn't feel pain. And Jenny Lind, who in this film she's like the Swedish opera singer. In this film, it says it shows her as like some temptress who tries to seduce him and make him leave his wife for her, and it's crazy because in real life she did exist and she was called Jenny Lind, but she was paid $350,000 to be in P.T. Barnum's show, which in today's money is about $10 million, so a lot. And she donated all of it to charity. I think it was to do with education in Sweden. So she was a really nice person, and she left P.T. Barnum's group because he was a horrible scumbag who was making loads of money off like exploiting people. So that, I think, my biggest takeaway from this film is it should have been two films, right? I'd love to see a biopic about P.T. Barnum that's truthful and everything. It shows all the dark side, like not a musical, just a serious film. I'd love to see that. I'd also love to see a musical about a showman with all these great songs. They should not be the same thing. I think if they changed the names and kept Hugh Jackman plays a fictional showman, and there's a fictional opera singer like that, then it's clearly inspired by some elements, but it's, you know, they're not claiming to be them, so it's fine. And I know like you can take royalties with films, but I think this guy was an absolute scumbag, and yet he really is the hero of the piece. That doesn't really sit right with me. The whole message is like, you know, this is me, I'm not ashamed of who I am and all this, and yet he really did exploit his freaks. They aren't freaks in this film. In fact, he kind of does freak face, if that's a thing. Like, he doesn't actually get a bearded woman. It's just a woman who's a really talented singer who wears a fake beard. And, you know, the only real, like, freak, as it were, is there's a dwarf, but that's it. And there's a fat guy, although he's wearing a fat suit. There's a really tall guy, although I'm pretty sure he's on stilts. There's, you know, a dog-faced boy. He's got fake dog face. And then, like, there's other freaks that are just not that good. Like, Yahya Abdul-Mateen is just black, and that's it. And there's a few other black people in it, and Zendaya's whole thing is just she's not even that black. Zendaya, she's a bit black, and apparently that qualifies. I mean, I can see it at the time, fair enough, and it's quite nice, the whole mixed race couple thing with Troy Bolton and how it's like. But I wasn't even doing a bit then. I accidentally called Zac Efron Troy Bolton. But it's because his song with Zendaya is very High School Musical. But no, I think it's a bit on the nose. I think his parents being like, "Oh, you bring shame on our family for that." It's a bit on the nose, but it's fine. But no, I just feel like the whole thing is about acceptance, and yet they don't actually get anyone who is sort of abnormal to be a part of the film. Like, it's showcasing it. While it's like with Come Fly With Me, right? Remember that? It was made by Matt Lucas and David Walliams. It only ran for 6 episodes in the UK. For anyone who doesn't know, it's like a mockumentary about people working in an airport. And that has since been taken off Netflix and everything because there's like black, brown, yellow face in it. So how I feel about that is, obviously that is a bit yikes, but their heart is clearly in the right place. So there's a character called Ian Foote, who's like a racist immigration guy, and he doesn't let anyone in the country and that. So it's clear that they've got the perspective that this is wrong. He shouldn't be discriminated against them. He's an idiot. We're mocking him for being racist. But then they also, like, there's Precious, who's like a Matt Lucas in blackface, is like a Caribbean woman, and so it's clearly meant to be. You're meant to be celebrating these people. I mean, you do love Precious. She's a lovely lady. You know, you do grow really fond of these characters, and you're not meant to be pointing and laughing. But at the same time, it is impersonating people you aren't. So that's kind of how I feel about this. Its heart is in the right place. It's saying we should be nice to all these people. They are humans, you know. There's no reason for them to be ashamed of who they are. We shouldn't judge them. But it's also not actually getting any of those voices involved in it. Although, like, obviously Hugh Jackman is great in this film, and Zac Efron's great, and Zendaya and everything, but it's just the fact that it's meant to be these underdogs, and yet they've got like the most attractive and talented people on the planet. There's a scene where he's recruiting everyone, right? And it feels to me like the scene in X-Men First Class where where Magneto and Charles Xavier are going around recruiting all these different mutants, and it's celebrating their powers and trying to get them to come together. And in fact, Hugh Jackman's in that scene, but he tells them to go fuck themselves. It feels like that, but so the bearded lady isn't just a sideshow. Hey, look, it's a woman with a beard. She's a really, really great singer, and the woman who plays her, Keela Settle, is so talented. She is a great singer, and her voice is phenomenal. She is really, really good. See, that's the thing. They kind of makes out like, hey, they've got talents outside of being freaks, whereas that wasn't what it was back in the day. Like, it was just, you would just stare at them. Like, they do stupid stuff. I mean, there's like the dwarf in this just dresses as a soldier and he rides around on a horse. Like, but that's not empowering. I think that's just mocking. And there's a line in this film which is, I think, quite telling, which is, people will laugh at me. Well, they're laughing anyway. You might as well make money off it. And like, yeah, fair enough. Okay, I can see that viewpoint. But it also, P.T. Barnum is clearly exploiting them. I don't think, and I know they do some rag to riches type thing with him, so you feel like, okay, he started from nothing. He was just a tailor's boy, and then he went into poverty, and then he worked his way up from the bottom. But I don't feel like it's enough, and it always comes back to what a horrible decision it was keeping the name P.T. Barnum and keeping the name Jenny Lind and Charity Barnum and all keeping the names. I think most of the problems would be fixed if they made it entirely fictional. So to round up, the way I do my ratings on this channel is I do knock off stars, like, morally. So Do the Right Thing is definitely a 5-star movie. That's a great film, but I knocked off a star because of Spike Lee's antics on set as the director, which was unacceptable. Maybe I would give it 5 now retroactively, but I knocked it off at the time, that's why. So I feel like I need to probably knock a star off for this. But, and you know, there are problems with it. But it is, when it's good, it's really, really good. So I'll give it 4 stars. It's really great. See, I think it's an interesting topic of discussion, because it's something where, like, they're so rare, sort of people with deformities and that you kind of don't know what's acceptable and what isn't, because you don't really hear their perspective. But I don't know, there's something about watching this film where it feels like, surely this is wrong. It feels to me like you know when you go to Nando's and you have a wing roulette, right? So they got those. You get 10 wings, and they're all different spices, and you eat one, and you're like, okay, that was fine. Oh, that one was really spicy. It's like that, right? So it's 10 wings, which is, like, let's be honest, it's not from 5 chickens. It's going to be from 10 different chickens. I've got a pet chicken called Rosa, who lives in my garden. You feel bad about it, right? You're eating it, and it's a delicious taste, but you can't escape the back of your mind saying, like, a lot of bad stuff happened to get me to this delicious taste in my mouth. And that's how I feel about The Greatest Showman. The Greatest Showman is like a wing roulette at Nando's. It is so great, but you know in the back of your mind that a lot of bad stuff had to happen to get you there. It's kind of like Hamilton, I guess, although I feel like Hamilton is so banging that and they do mention the slavery and stuff. It's not completely glossed over like it is here. But you know what I mean? Like, this fantastic thing which brings you so much joy wouldn't exist without a lot of bad stuff. So yeah, that's my review. 4-star film. It's really good. It's a film where I could immediately watch it straight after watching it. Like, I literally could just watch it all again straight away. But yeah, no, I'm going to review Freaks now, the 1932 horror film. It's surprisingly similar, and I think you should give that a watch. So yeah, I'll see you there.